At 6:17 a.m., two German-made Leopard 2A6 tanks, call signs Atlas and Hector, faced what should have been suicide. Across the misty plains east of a river in Ukraine, a full Russian armored brigade rolled forward. Dozens of T-90 and T-72 tanks, BMP infantry carriers, and support trucks packed with ammunition. 23 minutes later, that formation was in ruins. Satellite footage and verified field reports showed at least 7 Russian tanks and 6 BMPs destroyed, their hulks still burning on the road where the attack began. The outcome shocked even seasoned analysts. 2 tanks, each with only 4 crew members, had stopped an assault force 10 times their size. Not through luck, but through precision, coordination, and sheer nerve. If those Leopards had fallen, Ukraine's eastern defenses might have collapsed, opening a corridor straight toward Donetsk. Instead, they turned the field into a case study in modern warfare. How disciplined crews, smart sensors, and rapid decision-making can outmatch brute strength. The scene now raises one haunting question. How did 2 tanks survive a sky filled with drones, artillery, and anti-tank missiles, and send an entire brigade running? In the dim haze of a Donetsk dawn on October 21, 2025, the Leopard 2A6 tanks, Atlas and Hector, used cutting-edge thermal sights to spot a Russian armored brigade, packed with T-90M and T-72 B-3 tanks, long before the enemy could react. That early detection turned a quiet field near the Vovcha River into a deadly trap. The German-built Leopards, operated by Ukraine's 33rd Mechanized Brigade, relied on advanced optics that painted Russian vehicles as glowing white shapes against the cool landscape. This gave the crews a crucial edge in a war where seeing first means striking first. Atlas locked onto a T-90M at 3.6 kilometers, its thermal sight piercing the morning mist to reveal idling engines and turrets pointed cluelessly ahead. The Russian brigade, lumbering in a predictable line, had no idea it was already in the crosshairs of a NATO tech predator, as the Leopard's sensors fed precise data to their 120mm guns. The first shot roared from Atlas, a DM-63 armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot round screaming at 1,750 meters per second, slamming into the T-90M's turret and igniting its ammo compartment in a fiery blast that sent black smoke curling skyward. This devastating hit, detailed in a National Security Journal report, exploited a fatal flaw in Russian tank design: poorly stored ammunition that turns a single penetration into a catastrophic explosion. The T-90M's turret popped off like a lid under pressure, a vivid reminder that even modernized Russian tanks carry vulnerabilities no extra plating can hide. Hector, positioned in a shallow dip, stayed silent for a split second, its crew scanning for the next target through the same high-tech optics. The Leopard's ability to fire such precise shots stemmed from their Rheinmetall L/55 gun, which outranges Russian 125mm cannons by nearly a kilometer, according to Military Balance 2025 data. This range advantage let Atlas and Hector pick off threats while staying beyond the enemy's effective reach, a tactic that has shredded 197 Russian tanks in Donetsk since September 2025, per ISW estimates. Coordination between the 2 tanks worked like a well-oiled machine, their data-linked systems acting as the glue for a deadly hunting pair. One spots, the other shoots, and both move like shadows. Atlas's commander, peering through a panoramic sight, fed real-time heat signatures to Hector, which then swung its turret to lock a T-72B3 nosing down a slope. The second Leopard's shot, another 63 dinars, punched through the T-72's front plate, sparking a fire that consumed the crew compartment in seconds, as documented in a Militarny video from a similar clash near Pokrovsk. This teamwork wasn't just about raw power. It leaned on digital systems that let the crews share battlefield data faster than Russian radios could crackle. Ukraine's Leopards, numbering around 100 from NATO allies, have maintained a 1-to-5 kill ratio against Russian armor, per Oryx's October 2025 tally, proving that linked sensors create a force multiplier no single tank could match. The Leopard's thermal sights, capable of detecting heat through fog and smoke, gave their crews a clear picture while Russian tankers fumbled in the dark, their older optics struggling to match NATO's clarity. The Russians, relying on refurbished T-90Ms and T-72B3s, 2,000 of which are slated for upgrades by 2036 per TASS, lacked the sensor edge to counter Ukraine's tech advantage. When Atlas's gunner fired, the shot wasn't just a slug of metal. It was the endpoint of a data chain that processed terrain, wind, and target distance in milliseconds, a process National Security Journal calls decision dominance. The stakes of this moment rippled beyond the battlefield, as Ukraine's ability to halt Russian advances with just 2 tanks signals a shift in modern combat, where technology and training outshine numbers. Russia's Brigade, part of 26 failed assaults across 45 kilometers of Donetsk in October 2025, bled vehicles because it couldn't match the Leopard's digital eyes. Comment below, do you think high-tech sensors make tanks like the Leopard unstoppable? Or are drones the real game-changer? The battle truly began when Russian counterfire filled the sky. Seconds after their tanks were hit, Russian artillery poured shells across the plain, and BMPs fired in sweeping bursts, covering the fields where Atlas and Hector had last been seen. To survive, the Leopard crews relied on what Western doctrine teaches: break the enemy's aim, disrupt its sensors, and never stay still long enough to become a target. Their weapons now were smoke, speed, and rhythm. Both tanks launched volleys of multispectral smoke grenades, forming thick gray walls laced with metal particles. The haze blocked infrared cameras, laser rangefinders, and drone optics, turning the Leopards into flickering silhouettes on Russian sensors. Inside that curtain, they reversed, pivoted, and slid into new firing angles faster than coordinates could update on enemy screens. The point was not to disappear entirely, but to confuse every system trying to find them. Russian unmanned aerial vehicles attempted to relay coordinates, but distorted heat signatures and jamming threw off artillery calibration. According to ISW analysts, Russian batteries in late 2025 wasted dozens of shells chasing moving targets masked by smoke. Atlas and Hector exploited that gap by shifting positions roughly every 200 meters, a pattern known as leapfrog mobility, where one tank fires while the other relocates. This continuous motion kept at least one gun ready while denying the Russians a stable line of fire. Shrapnel tore the soil, explosions shook the ground, yet both crews held their formation. Encrypted radios kept updates short and precise. Range, wind, direction, and movement fed directly to digital maps inside each tank. While Russian units still depended on analog voice calls, the Leopards operated on synced data feeds that refreshed every few seconds, allowing rapid adjustment without exposing themselves. Through the drifting haze, BMP-3s advanced into open ground, their cannons firing blindly. Atlas traced a muzzle flash through thermal overlay and launched a high-explosive round that hit the hull and set off stored ammunition. Hector, from a nearby trench, spotted another BMP creeping left and fired an armor-piercing shell that seized its turret and scattered the crew. Each alternation of shooting and shifting broke Russian cohesion, turning numerical advantage into confusion. As the fog and smoke merged, visibility dropped below 50 meters. Russian artillery began striking its own forward elements, later confirmed by intercepted communications on open-source military channels. Meanwhile, the Leopards moved in silence, their engines idling low to cut heat output. They used terrain like armor. Ridges, embankments, and shallow ditches absorbed fragments while concealing their hulls. The duel became a rhythm of survival, one tank popping smoke as the other took aim, then switching roles in seconds. Their L/55 guns stayed stable even on the move, letting Atlas hit targets without halting. Every action followed a strict tempo: shoot, move, communicate, never the same twice. Each delay meant a greater chance of being spotted by hovering drones still scanning the mist for movement. Ukrainian field reports later noted that this constant shifting reduced Russian artillery accuracy by more than 60%. By never remaining longer than 90 seconds in one coordinate, Atlas and Hector forced gunners to fire at ghosts. Speed became armor. Timing replaced thickness. Every sprint between ridges bought seconds that the enemy couldn't recover. Inside the turrets, heat, vibration, and pressure tested every member of the crew. They managed ammunition and systems in near darkness, trusting training more than instinct. A single error, a mistimed smoke burst or wrong pivot, could have exposed them. Discipline held the line where luck could not. When the smoke finally thinned, wrecked Russian vehicles burned across the valley. Artillery fire slowed. Forward observers had lost sight. The Russian brigade attacked the way it had for decades, by the book, not by the moment. Tanks led the push in a straight line, with BMPs and BTRs trailing close behind, engines roaring and dust rising in wide clouds. There were no drone scouts flying ahead, no overlapping sensors to watch the flanks, only raw momentum guided by pre-written orders. It was an approach that worked on paper but collapsed the moment it met a faster, smarter opponent. Atlas and Hector watched the column unfold through their thermal sights, each vehicle glowing like a beacon on the screen. Russian crews advanced with hatches open, commanders standing exposed, their radios filled with static as they tried to coordinate through the haze. The Leopard crews, working off a shared sensor feed, marked targets without speaking. Their coordination turned two tanks into a single system, while the Russian formation behaved like a set of isolated machines, blind to one another. A BMP-3 moved too far forward, its 30mm cannon firing short bursts toward Hector. Rounds struck the Leopard's side armor but failed to penetrate, deflected by modular composite plates layered with reactive panels. Inside, the crew barely noticed the impact. The spall liner, a protective lining that absorbs metal fragments, kept the compartment safe and quiet enough for the commander to issue the next order. Hector's gunner returned fire, sending a single heat round across 1.4 kilometers. The projectile punched through the BMP's thin upper hull and turned the vehicle into a torch in seconds. It was a small event in a larger battle, but it underlined a new rule. Protection is now defined by design, not by size. The Russian push lost shape once its lead element started burning. Without air cover or reconnaissance drones, the following vehicles had no idea where the fire came from. The brigade commander ordered all guns to open up, and the result was chaos. Rounds whistled into empty ground while the Leopards shifted positions, remaining unseen inside the thickening smoke. Their electronic systems updated firing data every few seconds, adjusting for terrain angles and heat bloom, while Russian gunners still relied on manual corrections shouted over unstable radio channels. At the heart of the clash was a collision of mindsets. The Russian army had built its doctrine around weight and volume. More tanks, more shells, more men. Ukraine's Western-trained crews operated around precision and tempo. Atlas and Hector did not fight harder. They fought cleaner, trimming every unnecessary action from their routine. They used their sensors not just to aim, but to understand the rhythm of the enemy, where the guns fired, when the reloads came, and how long each pause lasted. Every decision was made inside that window of confusion, the seconds before the next Russian salvo. When the BMPs and T-72s tried to close in, the Leopards had already repositioned along a shallow embankment. Their turrets pivoted as one, guided by shared telemetry. 2 shells left the barrels within seconds of each other, crossing in flight and slamming into different targets along the same ridge. One tank's front plate split open, the other's tracks blew apart, and the advance froze. Russian infantry jumped from their carriers, scattering for cover, unaware that every movement was still visible through the Leopard's thermal screens. Atlas and Hector proved that in a world ruled by sensors, even a single hesitation can be fatal. The Russians came with numbers and plans. The Leopards answered with precision and speed, and the difference was visible in the burning wrecks scattered across the plain. The air above the battlefield turned into a hunting ground the moment the drones appeared. Russian operators launched Orlan 10 reconnaissance UAVs to locate Atlas and Hector through the thinning smoke, followed by Lancet loitering munitions designed to dive on target with explosive precision. The sky hummed with the high-pitched whine of electric rotors, each carrying a camera capable of tracking the faintest heat signature. For the Leopard crews, survival meant reacting faster than those silent eyes could lock on. The first Orlan circled low, transmitting coordinates to a ground team that guided a Lancet toward the ridge. The drone came in from the northwest, hugging the tree line to mask its radar profile, before angling sharply into attack mode. Inside Hector, the commander's screen flared red as the threat alert flashed. In under 3 seconds, the crew dropped speed, released multispectral smoke, and shifted backward under a collapsed barn roof that had already been blown apart by earlier shelling. The falling debris formed a jagged shield that broke the Lancet's line of sight, and when the warhead dived, it struck the roof's remains instead of the tank. The explosion shredded wood and scattered shrapnel, but Hector was untouched. That split-second decision, backing under cover rather than trying to flee, turned a certain hit into a wasted strike. Atlas, positioned 200 meters away, watched another drone descend through the smoke column. The commander ordered tracers fired upward, not to destroy the UAV but to disrupt its camera focus. The bright streaks of light blended with the smoke, confusing the drone's sensors and throwing off its targeting algorithm. The grenade it dropped detonated harmlessly mid-air, its blast swallowed by the haze. Moments later, both Leopards shifted again, engines throttled low, slipping behind a shallow ridge before a new drone could reacquire them. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War later noted that such rapid micro-reactions have cut the success rate of Russian loitering drones by nearly half during late 2025. Each second of delay between detection and countermeasure means the difference between survival and destruction. The Leopard system integration, combining thermal sensors, acoustic detectors, and crew discipline, allowed them to respond almost automatically. The crew didn't debate. They acted through reflex built from endless drills. Modern drone warfare rewards agility over armor. The Leopard's survival showed that even the strongest tank is vulnerable if it cannot adapt within moments. Heavy plating can absorb fragments, but it cannot outsmart an eye in the sky. By learning to use terrain and environment as part of their defense, the Ukrainian crews turned vulnerability into advantage. Atlas and Hector operated under constant aerial observation, yet their survival came from blending technology with instinct. Against a swarm of cheap eyes and smart munitions, it is not brute force that keeps a crew alive. It is the ability to read the sky, act before impact, and vanish before the next strike arrives. By 6:40 a.m., the thunder of Russian engines had gone silent. What began as a confident armored push ended in smoke, wreckage, and confusion across the fields east of the Vovcha River. More than a dozen Russian tanks and infantry vehicles burned along the road, while the rest retreated in disorder. The 2 German-built Leopards, Atlas and Hector, pulled back safely, engines steady, their crews breathing through the last whiffs of gunpowder and diesel. 2 tanks had stopped a brigade. This outcome became more than a tactical win. It became a statement about modern warfare. Steel and numbers no longer decide battles, skill and discipline do. The Leopard's survival was built on training and instant decision-making, not on luck or armor thickness. Each move they made followed a rhythm learned through hundreds of drills: locate, strike, conceal, reposition. In that dance of seconds, hesitation meant death, and routine became instinct. When analysts later reviewed satellite images of the area, they counted dozens of destroyed Russian vehicles stretching over several kilometers. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Russian armored losses in this sector reached 1/5 of the brigade's total equipment in less than 30 minutes. The images told a story that no report could hide: a collapsed advance against a pair of crews who simply refused to break. Each Leopard crew member operated as part of a single mind, where the commander's voice and the gunner's sight aligned within seconds. Inside those tanks, every task mattered. The loader's timing, the driver's handling, the gunner's aim, all synced into a pattern that left no room for panic. Atlas and Hector didn't win because they fired first. They won because they thought together. That distinction between reaction and coordination is what makes a small force resilient under pressure. Russia's Brigade, built around massed steel, lacked that unity. Its tanks moved as individuals, not as parts of a system, and each loss fractured the formation further. Once the command network faltered, every vehicle became blind and alone. The Leopards, in contrast, turned constant communication into a weapon. When their sensors fused visual, thermal, and acoustic data, their decisions took seconds, while the enemy's required minutes. That time gap, just enough for one shot or one dodge, defined victory. Military observers say the engagement near Vovcha has already become a case study in the power of trained crews. If every Ukrainian company fielded 2 or 3 teams with the awareness and precision of Atlas and Hector, frontline dynamics could shift across Donetsk. That dawn proved one thing beyond dispute: victory belongs not to the side with the most tanks, but to the crews who can turn chaos into control. The clash between 2 Leopard 2 A6 tanks and an entire Russian brigade wasn't just a firefight, it was a warning shot to the world. It proved that in modern war, outcomes are no longer written by numbers or armor thickness, but by the speed of thought and the split-second choices made inside a turret. Sensors, discipline, and reaction time now matter more than the size of a formation or the weight of a shell. Atlas and Hector showed what happens when data, training, and instinct fuse into one purpose: a human edge sharper than any steel. Their victory turned doctrine upside down, forcing militaries to ask whether technology has finally replaced mass as the real weapon of dominance. And that leads to the bigger question. If 2 tanks can halt a brigade, what happens when 20 crews like them fight side by side under a shared digital network? Would that change the entire balance of this war, or rewrite how every army prepares for the next one? Maybe the era of raw firepower is ending, and the age of information warfare has already begun. Or maybe this is only the first glimpse of a far bigger transformation still to come. What do you think? Is the future of war decided by steel or by the minds inside it? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force, where every battle tells a story and every story reveals the next move in global warfare.